Joining us today, Venus Lim is a vivacious lecturer from D.I.S College who has been in the teaching industry for more than 5 years, holding a master's in special needs and inclusions, Bachelor of Music, and Diploma in Special Education.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Venus Lim.
Firstly, would you like to share with us what actually is a child's developmental milestone, as I believe most of us would not be aware of it?
For me, it is a set of skills or behaviors that you can observe from children. And in this milestone, developmental milestones, there are specific skills that children at specific age they will need to achieve accordingly. But my idea of referring to this milestone, developmental milestone, is it serves as a guideline and a reference for most teachers and parents. Most of these checklists that you can find, all right, that you can get from the internet, they are well-researched checklists. But again, you have to always go according to the child, because each child is individual and is very unique, and most of these checklists have been developed in other countries. Probably the culture settings and then the language setting could be a little bit different from our culture and our settings for our children in Malaysia. So whenever you're referring to all this milestone, right? We usually will give a buffer of 2-3 months. So don't get too worried if you receive, let's say your child is 2 years old, and then you check on the 2 years old milestone checklist for all the domains, right? And then you notice that your child is not meeting some of the items in the checklist. Do not worry so much about it. Because like I said, it serves as a guideline, a reference. What I can suggest is you always need to check back with your pediatrician so that your concerns will be answered, by the professional, instead of just referring to this reference. But in terms of that, because when we refer to developmental milestone, right, they are always the 5 big domains that we will pay attention to, right? The PILES, PILES, physical, intellectual, language, emotional, and social domain, right? So not all children will develop maturely according to their age for all these 5 domains. That's why I say it serves as a guideline, and you will always need to have a 2 to 3 months, gap in between. If your child is not meeting certain tasks or certain items, not to worry about that. Because a mother will have the instinct, I would think. And for teachers, because you've been practicing in the field for so long, you probably will already know and will be able to identify if you notice that some of the symptoms that the child is showing some developmental delay in certain area. But if I can add on one more thing, even though we rely on all this developmental milestone checklist for so many years already, right? No one actually questions about all these checklists, whether they are relevant or whether they are reliable or not. People will just use them. And then we think that, okay, whatever that I can find in internet is something that I can use directly. No, like I said, all children will come from different background, different culture, different practices at home will affect their developmental achievement. So the best way is to check with your pediatrician, right? That's the first thing that you want to do. Another thing is, I noticed when it comes to our milestone checklist, even though we talk about social and emotional domains, these checklists are very specific and measurable. Maybe because of that, there are no such thing as there's no item saying that my child is kind. It's very, very specific. The developmental psychologists will refer to it and then will just tell you very specifically, very technically, that whether your child is meeting the milestone or not. But I would think that the other side of the child needs to be recognized as well, not just these 5 big domains. Like my child's she's being kind, and then she loves to share, and then maybe she's being friendly. All these are the good things that we need to identify and recognize from our
Their
children.
strengths, right?
The strengths from the other part, not these are the items that you will not be able to find from the milestone checklist, but it is something that is very important for all children. So when you think that you're very down because you think that your child is not meeting the milestone, why don't you think from the positive side and then check on what the child can do instead of what the child can't do. So my child is being kind. It's a wonderful, it's a good thing to have. So that's what I think what child developmental milestone is. And I think there should be some improvement in terms of the checklist that we've been using nowadays.
The difference, something like genre for the parents.
Yeah, maybe we can park it under social and emotional. I don't know, because sharing is under social skills as well. But maybe, like I say, maybe because these are the strengths that cannot be measured. Yeah, and it might be difficult to observe, and it could, that there might be bias sometimes, and that's why they are not included in the checklist. But then, always have another column at the side of your checklist for you to write down all these good criteria, the strengths from the children, instead of mentioning that, oh, just tick, can do, cannot do, can do, cannot do. That's all. I find it very it's too specific in a way, because we're human being, it should be very fluid and dynamic.
Actually, I would like to know, why should the public, especially the parents or educators, they need to know about these child developmental milestones?
Like I said, it serves as a guideline and a reference, right? And we all the educators, despite the parents lah, let's talk about the teachers first. All the teachers will need to learn the child developmental milestone. We need to know whether a 2-year-old child, what are the things that a 2-year-old should be able to handle or should be able to do. So with this reference and guideline, we will be able to detect, or we will be able to notice, identify whether the child will need more supports or not. Okay, the supports is in terms of whether my child is achieving lower or higher compared to the peers. So this checklist, this milestone checklist will serve as a guideline for most of the teachers and parents, so that we will be able to identify whether my child is developing on par with the other peers, okay, and also whether I need to address certain issues or I need to address certain concerns because my child is not meeting the milestone or not, right? But like I say, it has to be somehow a little bit more flexible in terms of using your checklist.
Would like to ask, how can we know if a child is developing slowly, as based on the old method of using the checklist, it is just by taking all the criteria. So if the child cannot reach the criteria, does it mean they have the delays?
Well, it serves as a guideline. So if you notice there's some differences, and you're concerned about all these differences that your child is displaying, then the first step, you can just use a very simple checklist, the developmental milestone checklist, and just to do a very initial quick check first, and then from there you can analyze, or you will have a better picture of what your child is doing, how well is the child is doing, right? But of course, this when you use the checklist, what's more important is you need to know your child very well in order to be able to answer these questions, right? Because you have all the questions. It can be hundreds of questions in a checklist. So if you do not know your child very well, you will not be able to do that. So observation is something that we all need to do. Okay, so parents and teachers, you probably need to pay more attention to how your child play, how different is he, compared to other children, if you have the concerns. So besides using the checklist, I will always encourage the parents to do is learn always pick up all these skills, go and read some articles, and a more scientific way is to check with your pediatrician, right? And discuss with your children's teachers and see whether they have noticed other things that you didn't notice at home one. So all this observation, okay, besides using milestone checklist, another type of observation will be, writing down anecdotes, all this will serve as a very good evidence if you think you need to do further diagnosis or further checkup with your pediatrician. So you will have all this data, all this recording for you to share with. Then you can explain to the doctors even more clearly.
Parents who really do not know about the screening tool or checklist would like to know where can they actually look for it? Is it through online or any other way?
Yeah, there are a few websites that are reliable websites that you can actually check on, but not all are relevant. Like I say, each child is individual, and then you have to check on the background, then the culture and the settings. And in terms of the language checklist, it will be difficult for most of the Asian people because usually it's according to how well the child receive or speak the language of English, isn't it? So it can be a little bit challenging for some of the people who live in Asian countries or other countries who don't speak the common language. So when it comes to all this, you need to make some modification. So you do not just use the checklist just like that. You probably will need to advise, get consultation from your teachers and then your pediatrician to know where else you can get all these resources. So you can also do the same at home. You can also, do some simple checking at home as well. I noticed there are so many available tools online, right? Those that are free ones, some more is free resources, right? Yeah, I'm not saying that free is not okay. It's okay. But again, you have to carefully choose all these materials, whether they are suitable or not. You do not just use them. And sometimes after you use them, you get even more worried because you're not meeting all the criteria. And then you start getting worried, but actually maybe the checklist is not appropriate to your child. And sometimes the checklists that are fine, it's maybe mostly English, for example, right? Seldom you will get checklists in Bahasa Melayu. Maybe in Chinese, you still can get it from Taiwan and China. They have developed, all this checklists for you to use. But, for parents who don't understand the language, they will just simply tick, and it will be difficult for them to do on their own. So my advice for parents is don't do this alone. Always get help and ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. Check with your teachers. And then every time you send your child for vaccination or normal checkup, talk and ask your pediatrician, right? If your pediatrician is not willing to answer all these questions, because some peds are very, very busy, they have, very packed schedule. Uh, Again, like I said, find your own resources, join in all these parenting groups, get information from your other friends who are parents. So you open up yourself and just ask for help and then check, hey, my child is behaving such and such. Is your child doing the same thing? Should I be worried about, what can I do? So do not afraid to ask for help.
It means be more flexible about it.
Because where can we get screening tools, right? And if you don't know, you can get so many. There are thousands and millions available in the internet, but are they reliable resources for you to use? Will you be able to use them? Do you understand how it works? So sometimes you will still need some help and assistance in doing so.
Just now I heard the factors like the cultural factors that will determine, and then also the parents and educators, they need to be observant enough to notice the child's behavior in different environments. So are there
Correct.
any other factors that the caregivers or the early childhood educators need to be aware when using this checklist?
Well, number one, we always need to be neutral, as in we cannot have any biasness. We're not comparing with this child and another child. Okay, this is number one. You cannot be biased when you do observation or filling up all these checklists or screening tools. Number two, like I say, you need to know the child very well in order to do so, right? And your question was, what other factors that will be influencing the environment that the child is experiencing? For example, if the parents always put the baby in the playpen and then the teachers notice that, hey, by 2 years old, the child is still not crawling, then we need to investigate further. Why is this child not crawling at 2 years old? Because most of the children at 2 years old, they should have this ability to crawl. Well, I'm not talking about walking yet. I'm just talking about crawling. Okay. Now, because opportunity is not given, that's why the child cannot learn how to crawl. That's why the environment factors you need to consider and you need to investigate further. Let's talk about another example. If both of the parents and the environment that the child is bathed in, it's not very language rich environment. Okay, the parents don't talk. They seldom talk to the baby, or they don't give a lot of interaction and social with the child. And so then you notice, hey, the child is not responding very well, or not socializing very well, or probably not picking up words that fast compared to the same age children. Now, again, why the child is not performing as how the other children should be? Maybe because he has not been exposed to all this environment. So I would think that environment is a big factor when it comes to the growth of children. The children grow according to how the environment is. Your behaviors, your social emotional, your language, and your physical skills. Look at children who live in kampong area, for example. Their physical skills are just amazing. A 3 years old child boy in the kampong can climb a tree. A 3 years old child living in the city probably cannot even climb the stairs. Because maybe parents are too protective, for example. Hey, baby, you don't climb the stairs. It's very dangerous. Come block it with the gate so you don't climb it. The environment and how the attitude of the parents are, the caregivers are. Let's give you another example. Feeding, eating food. If the child being fed all the time, of course he will not acquire the skill of self-feeding because he doesn't have the chance to do so. And all the while we're thinking, hey, how come the child 5 years already still don't know how to eat by his own and not even know how to use a spoon? But of course, despite all these environmental factors, we also need to check whether the child has any form of disabilities or not. That is also another factor that is affecting the child achieving all the milestones in the checklist. So if the child is having any form of disabilities, maybe there's some of the domains, for example, maybe physical, the child may have difficulties in using, his motor skills functionally due to his disability. So it's important to check. It's important to know your child. Do not wait if you notice that the child is showing some differences. Now, these differences can be whether showing a delay or advanced. A lot of people will just ignore when the child is being too smart. When the child is being too smart, you need to also pay attention to it because the child will acquire some support as well when it comes to his learning. Yeah, you need to give a lot more supports to not just children who show developmental delays, but also children who show advance in their developmental achievement.
I think to be aware of the child who are advanced is quite a new thing for the private as well.
Yeah, but again, I mean, I'm not an expert in the gifted and talented area, but then these are the group that sometimes we've been neglected, I would say, because we would think that they are smart enough so they don't need support anymore. But actually they need even more supports, compared to even some of my children who are showing developmental delays.
Just now I heard you saying about the disabilities that parents and educators they should aware also. May I know what are some of the other disabilities?
I think the most obvious one will be the physical one, and then hearing and visual. These are the most obvious. We can see the symptoms very fast. If you pay close attention to your children, then you will be able to notice. But again, because some parents, they don't have this awareness, and they will be still having some issues or problem in detecting the child is not being able to hear. So I think these are the most obvious symptoms that you can observe first. When you go for checkup, make sure that your pediatrician, your doctors are checking on the physical aspects of your child, that the hearing and the visual are functioning well. Yeah, the pediatricians will know how to do that. And then when we rule out all these symptoms, then further down will be the most common one, children were having autism. Okay, because for children who have autism, you can also detect or identify some of the symptoms as young as below 2 years old. So from there, you will notice that, hey, the child is not showing interest in socialization. So that can be one of the red flags that you want to pay attention to. But for children who have difficulties in reading and writing, all this probably you can only notice that when it comes to 6 or 7 years old, when they go for formal education. So just be aware of how the children are growing from one stage to another stages. And then for young children, like I said, it's important to make sure that they are hearing well and they're seeing well. And then if they cannot, there are always intervention strategies that you can apply, that you can use to help them to adapt to the new lifestyle earlier.
Hearing you saying that the parents or educators can seek for the child pediatricians when spotting the red flags, are there other specialists that might also be involved in a child's interventions?
The easiest one will be your family doctor or pediatrician, because they can always give you the referral. They can always refer when they notice the problems or the issues. Then they will be able to give you the advice or where to go. But of course, besides pediatrician, other professionals that you can engage in will be the developmental pediatrician. So, what is the difference between the general pediatrician and the developmental pediatrician, right? They are the same actually, but then the developmental pediatrician, they study more, maybe another additional 3 years to understand the whole child development, and so they can do assessment for children who are having autism or other form of disabilities. So they will be able to do all this assessment. But for a regular pediatrician, because they do not study for another additional 3 years, right? Even though they know the developmental milestone of all children, but they are not so focused into the developmental learning of children who have disabilities like autism, intellectual problem, or different form of disabilities. So besides pediatrician, which I think is the most straightforward, easy for parents to engage one. Then of course we have psychiatrists, we have some other specialists. Like when you want to check your eyesight, you need to engage to the optometrist or the audiologist for your hearing. And then we have clinical psychologists, we have educational psychologists. Both are psychologists, but then they serve in different area. Educational psychologists will be focusing on the education aspects, academic aspects of children. So clinical will be more on mental health, right? Yeah, so these are the other professionals that you can engage in when you need more consultant and advisors from these professionals to do assessment and to do diagnosis.
Just now I heard psychologist. Is that a difference, the psychologist and the child psychologist? Is it something like the just now you mentioned the developmental pediatricians and the normal pediatricians?
The focus is different. We have clinical psychologists and then the educational psychologists, right? Like I said, educational psychologists focus on the academic aspects of the children. So they will do observation in schools. They will, observe how well the child is adapting to the school environment, the academic skills and all that. But for clinical psychologists, it's more towards the well-being of the child. They will still check on developmental, but then the setting is different. Where they work is different.
Previously, you have mentioned about the early interventions that if they notice early symptoms or red flags, then the professionals or specialists, they do refer them to other specialists for early interventions. Why is this early intervention is so important for those who notice red flags?
Probably I will explain what is early intervention first. Yeah. When we notice that our child needed extra support, right? Either to improve the situation of the child, So we want to help the child to face all these issues, right? To help him to improve. So in order to help all these children to improve, we will use different types of methods. We label all this as strategies. Okay, different type of strategies to help the child to improve his current developmental milestone. When we can detect the child at a very early age, let's say 2 years old, okay, then we need to act quick. We need to do it as fast as possible. That's why we say as early intervention. We want to start as early as possible so that we can support the child to face all the problems and issues, and then to help him to meet at least a bit of partial of the developmental milestone so that he can be a functional and capable person.
Coming to the end of our seminars, I would like to ask Ms. Venus, do you have any words to share with the parents and educators about this child's development, the overall of it?
Being a parent, it's very, very important to spend time. And then to play with your children. I know not many parents know how to play with their kids. So be a little bit more flexible. Just put down your phones and your work aside and then attend to your child when they need you. From there, you will be able to know your child very well, and then you can, of course, bond with them. When you understand and know your child very well, you can help them, support them according to their needs. So first is to spend time and to work with your child, because nowadays a lot of parents, especially in cities, right, a lot of parents are very busy with their work. You need to know what is your priority. So number 2 is your priority. Who or what is your concern, and what is your priority for life? What is important for the child? What is important for you? Then you probably need to be clear and be aware of this. So prioritize things that you think are important, and if you really think that you cannot afford the time to spend with the children, please engage professionals to do so. But I will still think that, the family bonding and then the interaction between the parents and the child is super, super important. With that environment, you can raise a child who is happy, who is emotionally stable, who's been loved, then he knows how to love other people as well. So I think that's very important for parents. For teachers who are in this industry, I think a lot of people will say, oh, early childhood educators, you must have a lot of patience. I think it's more than just patience. For me, is you need to calm yourself down. You need to be emotionally stable in order to sustain in this industry. So make sure that you take breaks. For example, give yourself breaks. Parents also the same. Make sure you give yourself breaks when it comes to raising your children or parenting your children, because I know it's very, very tiring, and probably everyone will get exhausted.
In terms of mentally and physically, right?
Correct. So for parents, make sure you give yourself some break time as well. And then for teachers, the same thing, make sure that your emotion is stable when you work with your children. That is super important. How can we make our emotional stable? Be aware of the emotion, because your emotion can affect your behaviors. Then it can directly influence the children's behavior in your classroom. So that's very important. Number 2, give yourself break. Okay. Sometimes just give a little bit more trust for your children, that they are capable individual, that they can be independent. Teachers don't have to be busy all the time taking care of all the children under your care, So trust them, and then sometimes you can actually just let go. And then because I believe children, they are very independent, they can do a lot of things and they're very capable. So when they are capable and independent enough, then teachers, you actually can,
Be more relaxed a bit.
yeah, can I use the word relax a little bit? But you will still be observing, I know, but you're giving the space and the time for yourself and for the kids to grow. Sometimes before you do an action, before you want to react to certain situation, just stop and think first before reacting it too fast, you know. So that is another advice. This advice will be for all parents and teachers. It will be very difficult and lonely to do it alone because parenting and raising a child requires a lot of effort and time, mentally and physically. So my advice for everyone is don't do it alone. Don't do this alone. Share your responsibilities with other people around you. For mothers, share it with your husbands, your family members, the siblings. Because I know mothers get drained up very soon and very fast because they handle everything on their own. So it's time to train your husbands to share the responsibilities. Yeah, that's number one. So don't do this alone. Teachers, you have colleagues to work with. Share your problems with your colleagues and ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. And then very important, always upgrade yourself because the world is changing too fast. There are so many great information and then new methods out there. Keep yourself at the curiosity stage all the time. Always want to learn. It's a very important criteria for all teachers, you know, always wanting to learn, always drive yourself to learn, to learn and to learn. When you learn, and when you acquire all this information, your children will be benefited. Learn all the skills and then do read up all the articles about parenting and children, right? Join all these parenting groups, you know. Sometimes it's good to attend conferences and seminars. Now, at this time, it's very convenient because everything is online now. So and there are lots of free sessions available. So join and learn. And then, of course, make changes. Do not just learn and then not making any changes.